There is no monotheism in the Bible.
Alright, let's see what this scholar has to say.
All right, let's see it. So the Bible acknowledges the existence of other gods from beginning to end.
So I think this would be a straw man of what monotheists believe.
No, it is not a straw man. It's not what every person who identifies as a monotheist believes, but I have spent 20 years debating with Jewish and Christian folks who insist that the Bible unilaterally and univocally denies the existence of any other gods.
So they don't believe that one God means that there cannot also be demons referred to as lower gods, or judges also referred to as lower gods.
So there is no one anywhere in the Bible who is referred to as a lower god, because that term does not exist anywhere in the Bible. That is something people, well after the Bible was completed, made up in order to make excuses for the fact that the Bible refers to many other entities just as gods, be they demons, angels, just the gods of the nations, or humans who were considered to be divine. Now, there's nowhere where judges are referred to as gods. Psalm 82, Exodus 21, Exodus 22, these are not exceptions. And I directly address this question in my book from last year, Adonai's Divine Images, which is an open access volume you can freely access on my Linktree. If you want a more extended discussion of Psalm 82, you can look at my 2018 Journal of Biblical Literature article, The God's Complaint, Psalm 82 as a Psalm of Complaint, which is also freely available on my Linktree.
As we see, according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, theists believe that reality's ultimate principle is God, an omnipotent, omniscient goodness that is a creative grounding of everything other than itself. Monotheism is the view that there is only one of such God.
So here this creator is actually making my point for me. I state in that video that the modern concept of monotheism originates in a philosophical framework developed in the 17th century in the Enlightenment, building on the foundation of the doctrine of creation ex nihilo, a post-biblical doctrine. And so that definition that they shared, where God is reality's ultimate principle and omnipotent, omniscient goodness that is the creative ground of everything other than itself, is a thoroughly post-biblical philosophical framework. And so this is an argument for the absence of monotheism in the Bible. Now you can find some of the terms and titles that later get worked into the foundation of this larger, more complex philosophical framework in the Bible. But as I've stated in other videos, we are coming much further down the road, turning around and looking back at the Bible through those interpretive lenses and mistaking the terms and the titles that originally existed independently of that philosophical framework for that later developed philosophical framework. So this is making my point for me.
So within every church father that you read, when they speak of this one God, almost all of them always speak of this one God in renewance with this fact that this one God is the one God that created all things. Yet they acknowledge in the same breath there are also lower gods that do not compare to him. Now, this sounds a lot like the definition we read earlier.
Except that definition requires creation ex nihilo, and you do not find creation ex nihilo until the late 2nd century CE. I was very clear about this in the video, and this creator is simply not acknowledging that, much less engaging it.
And again, even the Gnostics had this idea when, in, for example, Zostrianos 9:9 says the first God, that is the primary nature of divinity. So they're saying the one with the primary nature of divinity, the highest one, is who we call the one God.
But this makes absolutely no reference whatsoever to the doctrine of creation ex nihilo, which is required for that definition that was shared from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And the doctrine of creation ex nihilo was created originally in the late 2nd century CE.
Now, this notion that you can't get this from the text of this idea of monotheism being one supreme God while there can be other rulers, it's just plain false. Here's an excerpt from Against Heresies by Irenaeus, who lived in the early 2nd century.
So this is Irenaeus using terms and conceptual frameworks that are nowhere found in the Bible. This is not an argument that this idea is in the Bible. This is an argument that other people after the Bible came up with this idea. But guess what Irenaeus also doesn't talk about? The doctrine of creation ex nihilo. Having created all things is not an assertion of creation ex nihilo.
So he clearly says here that he is the only God that is omnipotent, is omnipresent, etc.
And here, this creator yada 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 is the most important part of the definition from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Precisely the doctrine of creation ex nihilo, which is not in Irenaeus' statement.
Furthermore, we see the earliest Christians also agree with this definition. We see people like Aristotle of Athens talk about it in his Apology in the 15th chapter. This has always been it. For example, in his treatise against Gnostic, Plotinus. So he's saying here he's one through the fact that he makes other gods, but he is the one above all.
So none of these texts are actually addressing what I pointed out in that video is the foundation of the modern concept of monotheism, which is the post-biblical doctrine of creation ex nihilo. These are just 2nd and 3rd century CE Christian and Greco-Roman takes on what's called the rhetoric of incomparability, which is where you just praise a deity by saying they're the coolest thing that has ever happened. And this goes back thousands of years. We see this in societies that have absolutely no relationship to monotheism, where they're praising their deity as the one who made all that exists and the one who is king over all the gods and created all the gods. In fact, let's take a look at one of those compositions. So this is from the Context of Scripture translation of the Great Cairo Hymn of Praise to Amun-Ra. And you can pause and read as much of this as you want. I'm going to start about 3/4 of the way down in the left column with the all caps. You see, you are the sole one who made all that exists, one alone who made that which is, from whose 2 eyes mankind came forth, on whose mouth the gods came into being. Hail to you who did this entirely, one, alone, with numerous arms, who spends the night watchful while everyone sleeps, who seeks what is useful for his flock. Ammon, enduring all things. Atum, Horakti, praise to you, as they all say. Jubilation to you, because you have wearied yourself with us. Let the earth be kissed for you, because you have created us. Hail to you, by all flocks. Jubilation to you, by all foreign lands, to the heights of heaven, to the breadth of the earth, to the depth of the ocean. The gods bowing to your majesty, exalting the might of him who created them, rejoicing at the approach of him who begat them, saying to you, come in peace, Father of the fathers of all the gods, who suspended heaven, who laid down the ground, who made what exists, who created that which is, sovereign, life, prosperity, health, chief of the gods. Let us adore your might, inasmuch as you have made us. Let us act for you, because you have borne us. Let us give you jubilation, because you have wearied yourself with us. Hail to you who made all that exists, Lord of truth, Father of the gods, who made mankind, who created the flocks, and so on. If this came from the book of Psalms or from a 2nd century Christian author, you would hold it up as another example of monotheism, and it would still not be an example of monotheism, because it has absolutely nothing to do with the post-biblical doctrine of creation ex nihilo, much less the much later philosophical framework of monotheism that took many centuries to develop. This comes from Egypt's second intermediate period between the 18th and the 16th centuries BCE, and it has absolutely nothing to do with anything remotely approximating monotheism. So you actually have to engage these texts on their own terms, and you have to situate them within their historical and their rhetorical and their literary settings so that they can be understood on their own terms. If all you're doing is looking at the past through the interpretive lenses that were developed well after these texts that you are looking at were composed, all you're ever going to see is those later interpretive lenses. You're never going to be able to understand the texts on their own terms. And this video provides absolutely zero evidence that anything was wrong with my video and that monotheism is found anywhere in the Bible.